At the family party, my brother announced, "You don't belong in this family." Mom stayed silent, clutching her glass. I forced a smile, grabbed my bag, and slipped out into the night. The next day, when the lights went out, 19 missed calls from home. I'm Emily Harper, 38 years old, and I never expected my own brother to betray me in front of everyone at a family party in Overland Park, Kansas. It was a warm summer evening, the kind where neighbors and relatives gathered in my parents' cozy suburban house to celebrate Dad's 65th birthday. I'd spent hours crafting a 3-layer vanilla cake piped with intricate buttercream swirls, a nod to my old days running a coffee shop. The living room hummed with chatter glasses, clinking kids running through the hall. I was carrying the cake from the kitchen, its sweet aroma filling the air when my brother, 5 years younger, stood up from the couch. His voice sliced through the noise like a blade. "Emily, you don't belong in this family." He set his eyes hard, not even glancing at the cake I'd poured my heart into. "We don't need you here." The words hit like a punch to the gut. I froze the cake heavy in my hands, my face burning under the weight of every gaze in the room. Mom sat at the dining table, clutching her wine glass so tight I thought it might crack, her lips pressed into a thin line, saying nothing. Dad at the head of the table mumbled something about calming down, but his voice was weak, barely audible over the sudden silence. The neighbor from next door shifted in her seat, her eyes darting between me and my brother. The couple from across the street, stiff and awkward, stared at their plates. Nobody spoke up, not a single guest. The air felt thick, suffocating, like I was drowning in their silence. My brother's words echoed in my head, each one sharper than the last. I set the cake down on the table, the buttercream smudging under my trembling fingers. I forced a smile, tight and brittle, and picked up my wineglass. The bitter taste matched the sting in my chest as I took a slow sip, buying time to steady myself. I wasn't going to let them see me break. They didn't deserve my tears. I set the glass down, grabbed my bag from the corner of the room, and walked toward the back door. Every step was deliberate, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor, the only sound in the house. I slipped out into the cool Kansas night, the door shutting softly behind me. My car was parked down the street, and I drove 10 miles to a motel off 69th Street, the neon sign flickering in the dark. My phone stayed silent in my bag. No calls, no texts, just the hum of the road. I didn't look back. All I knew was this: I was done being the one they pushed aside. They thought they could live without me. Fine. Let them try. But when the lights go out, the water stops, and the bills pile up, will they still feel so sure? I checked into the motel, the clerk barely glancing up as I handed over my card. The room was small, the air stale, but it was mine for the night. I dropped my bag on the bed, my chest tight with a mix of anger and clarity. They'd crossed a line, and I wasn't going back to being their doormat. My brother's voice, cold and final, played on repeat in my mind. Mom's silence hurt worse, her grip on that glass saying more than words ever could. Dad's weak attempt to smooth things over was just noise. They'd all made their choice, and now I was making mine. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the cracked wallpaper, my hands still shaking from the weight of what had happened. 5 years of carrying their lives on my shoulders, and this was how they repaid me. I'd sold my coffee shop, my pride and joy, to keep their house afloat. $2,000 a month wired straight from my account, and they called me a burden. My brother's words weren't just a moment of anger, they were a truth they'd all been hiding. The party was supposed to be a celebration, but it turned into a wake for the family I thought I had. I didn't sleep that night. My mind churned, piecing together how I'd ended up here alone in a motel with nothing but a bag and a broken heart. I'd given everything to keep them standing, but they didn't see me. Not anymore. Maybe they never did. The thought twisted in my chest, sharp and cold, but it also lit a fire. I wasn't going to let them define me anymore. They wanted a life without me. They'd get it. And they'd learn what that really meant when the consequences hit. My phone buzzed once, twice, as I lay on the stiff motel mattress. I didn't check it. I didn't need to. I knew it was them, already starting to feel the edges of what they'd done. 19 missed calls would come later, but for now, I let the silence of the room wrap around me. I'd spent years keeping their world together, but tonight I was done. Tomorrow, I'd start unraveling the threads I'd tied myself to their lives with. They'd feel the weight soon enough, and I'd be ready for it. I closed my eyes, the hum of the motel's air conditioner drowning out the world outside. My brother's voice still lingered, but it was fading, replaced by a resolve I hadn't felt in years. I'd built a life once before, and I could do it again. This time, it would be for me. No more carrying their burdens, no more swallowing their insults. I'd given them everything, and they threw it back in my face. Let them figure out how to stand without me. I was done being invisible. I lay there, my bag still packed, knowing this was just the beginning. They'd pushed me out, but I'd show them I didn't need them either. This isn't just my story, it's for anyone who's felt invisible. Drop your city and time in the comments. I want to see how far this reaches. If you've been pushed aside by family, you'll understand. Subscribe, hit the bell for part 2, where I cut every bill. Let's talk about standing up for yourself. I woke up in a motel room off 69th Street, the hum of a cheap air conditioner cutting through the silence. My phone sat face down on the nightstand, buzzing with texts I refused to read. I stared at the ceiling, my mind drifting back to 5 years ago when I sold my coffee shop to save their house. It wasn't just a business, it was my heart built from scratch, with early mornings grinding beans and late nights balancing books. Brides would come in glowing, asking for custom lattes for their big day. I loved every second, even when my hands were stained with espresso. That shop, Harper's Brew, was my pride. I'd saved for years to open it, pouring every dollar into a cozy space with wooden tables and chalkboard menus. Then Dad called one night, his voice heavy. Their house, the one I grew up in, was sinking under debt. Medical bills from Mom's heart surgery, a second mortgage, they were drowning. The roof leaked, the pipes groaned, and they couldn't keep up. I didn't hesitate. I sold the shop for $150,000, enough to clear their debts, fix the roof, and keep the lights on. I moved back into my childhood bedroom thinking it was temporary, just until they got back on their feet. But temporary stretched into 5 years. I wired $2,000 a month from my account: electricity, water, internet, property taxes, even their streaming subscriptions. I took a job at a local nursery, arranging plants for half the pay I'd earned at my shop, just to keep cash flowing. Dad would nod a quiet thanks. Mom hugged me, her arms warm but fleeting. My brother, though, he changed. Tyler, who used to be my shadow, started treating me like I was in the way. Growing up, Tyler was my best friend. He'd trail behind me, his sneakers scuffing the pavement, begging to help me set up coffee stands for school fundraisers. "You're the coolest, Emily," he'd say, his eyes wide, grinning as we sneaked into the backyard to watch fireflies, whispering about his dreams of being a graphic designer. I taught him how to drive, covered for him when he stayed out too late at parties. We were a team. But when I moved back, that Tyler was gone. He'd roll his eyes when I entered the kitchen, mutter about me taking up space. Once he snapped at me for leaving a mug on the counter, saying I was a guest who'd overstayed. I brushed it off, thinking he was stressed, his freelance design gigs barely paid, and he was always chasing clients online. But the jabs kept coming, each one sharper. He'd blast music to drown out my voice when I tried to talk leave notes about chores I hadn't done. Last month, he told Mom loud enough for me to hear that I was freeloading, as if I wasn't the one keeping the house running. I tried to stay out of his way. I'd wake up at dawn, grab coffee at a diner before anyone stirred, walk the trails around Overland Park to give them space. Most nights, I ate dinner alone in my room, scrolling through old photos of Harper's Brew, missing the smell of fresh coffee. Mom and Dad didn't notice the tension. Dad spent his days in the garage fixing neighbors' lawnmowers for extra cash. Mom was busy with her book club, chatting about novels with the neighbor from next door. They leaned on my money but never asked how I was holding up. Tyler's coldness cut the deepest. The kid who used to beg for my advice now acted like I was an intruder. I'd catch him glaring when I paid the electric bill as if my help was an insult. 2 weeks ago, he left a note on the fridge. "Stop acting like you own this place." I didn't respond, just kept wiring the money, hoping he'd come around. But lying in that motel bed, I saw it clearly. I'd given up my independence, my dream to keep their lives intact. And they didn't care. My savings were nearly gone. The nursery job barely covered my own expenses, yet I was still pouring $2,000 a month into a house that didn't want me. The realization hit hard, like waking up from a long sleep. I'd been blind, thinking my sacrifices would earn their respect. Tyler's attitude wasn't just stress, it was resentment. He didn't see my help as love, he saw it as control. Mom and Dad, with their nods and hugs, were complicit, letting him treat me like I was nothing. I sat up, my chest tight but my mind sharp. I grabbed my laptop from my bag, the screen lighting up the dim room. I needed to see exactly how much I'd been carrying for them. Logging into my bank account, I scrolled through years of payments: electricity $300, water $100, internet $80, insurance $400, repairs, subscriptions, fees. It added up fast, draining the life I'd built. I closed the laptop, my hand steady now. An idea was forming, not out of anger but clarity. I wasn't going to keep enabling them. They'd taken my sacrifices for granted, and I was done. Tyler thought I didn't belong. Fine. I'd let them see what life was like without me. I lay back on the bed, the air conditioner's hum fading into the background. My phone buzzed again, but I ignored it. I wasn't ready to hear their excuses. Tomorrow, I'd head to Paul and Amber's house, my old friends who'd been there when I sold the shop. They'd help me figure out what came next. I thought back to the early days at Harper's Brew, when Tyler would sit at the counter sketching logos on napkins, asking for my feedback. That memory felt like a lie, now a ghost of a bond we'd lost. I'd spent years trying to hold on to that version of him, but he wasn't that kid anymore. None of them were the family I'd fought for. The weight of that truth settled in, heavy but freeing. I closed my eyes, ready to let go of the life I'd been clinging to for them. The motel room felt smaller as the night wore on, but my resolve grew stronger. I wasn't just walking away from their house, I was walking away from their expectations. They'd built their lives on my sacrifices, and I'd let them. No more. Tomorrow, I'd start cutting the ties that bound me to their world. They'd feel the consequences soon enough, and I'd be ready to face whatever came next. I wasn't sure what that would look like, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was choosing myself. I checked out of the motel by noon, my bag rattling in the trunk as I drove to Paul and Amber's house in a quiet Overland Park cul-de-sac. They'd been my lifeline since I sold the shop, always ready with coffee and a laugh. Their bungalow was a haven, a world away from the stale motel air. Paul opened the door before I could knock, his face creased with worry. "Emily, what happened?" he asked, pulling me inside. Amber was in the kitchen, setting out sandwiches, her eyes soft but searching. I sank into a chair at their dining table, the weight of the past night heavy in my chest. I didn't mention the cake or the wine, just the sting of my brother's words. How he'd stood up in front of everyone, his voice cold, saying I didn't belong. How Mom sat there, her silence louder than any shout, and Dad barely tried to intervene. "They think they're better off without me," I told Paul, my voice steady despite the ache. And no one stopped him. Amber reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Paul leaned back, his jaw tight, like he was piecing together a puzzle he'd seen before. "You know," Paul said after a moment, "sometimes people don't value what you do until it's gone. They need to feel the consequences to understand." His words hit like a spark. I'd been carrying their lives for years, and they'd taken it for granted. Amber nodded, pouring me a coffee. "Emily, what do they even do without your money?" she asked. The question landed harder than I expected. I'd never thought about it that way, not really. They'd built their world on my sacrifices, and I'd let them, thinking it was my duty. Sitting there with Paul and Amber looking at me like I deserved better, the truth became clear. My brother, Mom, Dad, they didn't see me as family, just a safety net. I'd given up my dream to keep their house running, and they'd pushed me out. Paul's words about consequences echoed in my mind. They wanted a life without me. They'd get it. I opened my laptop, the screen glowing in the dim kitchen light. My fingers moved before I could second-guess myself pulling up my bank account. Rows of automatic payments stared back at me. Electricity, $300 a month; water, $100; internet, $80; home insurance, $400; small repairs, streaming subscriptions, random fees. $2,000 a month drained from the savings I'd built pouring coffee and smiling through late nights. Paul glanced over, his nod subtle but firm, like he knew what was coming. Amber stayed quiet, her expression calm but resolute. My heart raced, but my hands were steady as I clicked into the payment settings. Electricity canceled. Water canceled. Internet gone. Insurance terminated. One by one, I cut every thread tying me to that house. Each click felt like shedding a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. I wasn't angry anymore, just clearer than I'd been in years. They'd made their choice, and now I was making mine. I closed the laptop, the screen going dark. Paul clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said. Amber offered their guest room, saying I could stay as long as I needed. I thanked them, my voice quieter but solid. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on my own ground. They'd pushed me out, but I wasn't running anymore. I'd given them everything: my business, my savings, my time, and they'd thrown it back in my face. Now they'd see what life looked like without me. My phone buzzed in my bag, a faint vibration I ignored. I wasn't ready for their voices, their excuses. I needed this clarity to hold because I knew the storm was coming. Paul poured another coffee, and we sat in silence for a moment, the weight of my decision settling in. I'd been their backbone for so long, and now I was pulling away. It wasn't about punishment, it was about survival. I'd spent years keeping their world together, but I'd lost myself in the process. Amber broke the silence, her voice gentle. "You've been carrying them too long, Emily. It's time to carry yourself." Her words sank in, solidifying the resolve I'd found in that motel room. I thought about the house I'd saved, the one I'd poured my life into. The electricity that kept their lights on, the water for their showers, the internet for Tyler's freelance gigs. All of it gone with a few clicks. I didn't feel guilt, just a strange relief, like I'd finally set down a load I'd carried too far. My brother's face flashed in my mind, not the kid who'd sketched logos, but the man who'd pushed me away. He'd learn soon enough what his words cost. I stayed at Paul and Amber's that night, their guest room, a small but welcome shelter. The walls were lined with photos of their kids, their travels, a life they'd built together. It reminded me of what I'd lost, not just the shop, but the chance to build something for myself. I'd given it all to a family that didn't see me, but now I was taking it back. My phone buzzed again, more insistent, but I let it sit. They'd feel the consequences soon, and I'd be ready for whatever came next. I lay in the guest bed, staring at the ceiling, the quiet of their house, a stark contrast to the motel's hum. My mind was clear, but my chest still ached, not from anger but from the weight of what I'd done. Cutting those payments wasn't just about money, it was about cutting myself free. I'd spent years trying to hold on to a family that didn't want me. Now I was letting go. Tomorrow they'd start to feel it, and I'd be here standing my ground, ready for the fallout. 3 days later, I was sipping coffee at Paul and Amber's kitchen table when my phone lit up with Tyler's name. I let it ring, my stomach twisting as I braced for what was coming. When I finally answered, his voice was sharp-edged with panic. "Emily, what did you do? The internet's out. I can't submit my designs. Mom's freaking out about shut-off notices for electricity and water. Turn it all back on now." No greeting, no apology, just demands, like I was still their unpaid fixer. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my tone even. "You said I didn't belong, Tyler. This is what that looks like." He didn't miss a beat. "You're overreacting as usual. Just flip it back on and stop being dramatic." His words stung, but I wasn't surprised. He had a knack for twisting things, making me the problem. I could hear Mom in the background, her voice shaky, probably worrying about the fridge going dark. "It's not my job to keep your life running," I said. "You're 33. Figure it out." There was a pause, then a bitter laugh. "You're so selfish, Emily. This is why no one wants you around." He hung up. My hands didn't shake, but my chest burned. Amber glanced over from the counter, raising an eyebrow. "He's got some nerve," she said. Paul folded his newspaper, chuckling low. "Give it a few days, they'll feel it." I nodded, but Mom's voice lingered, unsteady, tugging at me. She hadn't defended me at the party, but she was still my mom. Was I punishing her too? I pushed the thought aside. They'd let Tyler speak for them. Later that afternoon, my phone rang again. Mom's name flashed on the screen. Her voice was soft, pleading. "Emily, sweetheart, please. The house is falling apart. Tyler can't work without Wi-Fi, and Dad's repair orders are stuck. Can't you turn it back on? We're family." I closed my eyes, picturing her in the living room, probably wringing her hands like always when she was nervous. "Mom," I said, steady but firm. "Tyler said you'd be better off without me. You didn't disagree. I'm giving you what he wanted." There was a long silence. "He didn't mean it," she whispered. "You know how he gets. Please come home." I didn't answer right away. I thought of the years I'd spent tiptoeing around their house, wiring money, swallowing Tyler's insults, hoping for a shred of gratitude. "I'm not coming back," I said. "Not until Tyler owns what he said. You and Dad let him say it. You're all responsible." I hung up, my heart racing but my mind clear. Amber, who'd overheard, gave a small nod. "You're stronger than I'd be," she said. I didn't feel strong, just tired but focused. Tyler's call had been a jab, Mom's a plea, but neither changed the truth. They'd taken me for granted and I was done. That evening, Tyler called again, his voice louder, angrier. "You think this is a game, Emily? The neighbors are noticing." Susan came over, acting all concerned, but she's just nosy. "You're embarrassing us." I almost laughed. Embarrassing them. "After everything you embarrassed yourself," I said. "You wanted me gone. Now I'm gone. Handle your own bills." He exploded, calling me jealous, saying I'd always resented his freedom. I didn't bother listening. I ended the call and blocked his number. Paul walked in, catching the tail end, and gave a thumbs up. "About time," he said. I set the phone down, the weight of blocking Tyler settling in. It wasn't just a number, it was a line I'd drawn. Mom's plea stuck with me, her voice shaky, but she'd made her choice that night, sitting silent. They all had. The next morning, Mom left a voicemail. Her voice quieter, almost desperate. "Emily, we can't keep up. The water bill's due, and Tyler's trying to borrow from Susan. Please just talk to us." I didn't call back. I wasn't ready for more excuses, more pleas that dodged the truth. Tyler had drawn the line, and Mom and Dad had let him. Now they were scrambling, and I wasn't going to swoop in. I stayed at Paul and Amber's, helping with dishes, chatting about their garden. Their home felt like shelter, a place where I wasn't invisible. But I knew the storm wasn't over. Tyler wouldn't let this go, and Mom's calls would keep coming. I braced myself for what was next, knowing I'd made the right choice no matter how heavy it felt. They'd wanted a life without me, and I was giving it to them. But how long would it take for them to realize what they'd lost? I didn't know, but I wasn't going to wait around to find out. I had my own life to rebuild, and I was just getting started. I sipped my coffee, staring out Paul and Amber's window at the quiet cul-de-sac. The neighbors across the street were out, probably whispering about my family's mess. I didn't care. I'd spent too long worrying about their world, their comfort. Now it was about me. Tyler's demands, Mom's pleas. They were noise, not solutions. They'd have to face the consequences without me stepping in. I was done being their safety net. The next few weeks would show them what that meant, and I'd be ready for whatever came next. 2 weeks later, a text from Susan, the neighbor next door, popped up on my phone. "Everything okay at your folks' place?" "Looks rough." I didn't reply, but I had to see it for myself. I borrowed Paul's car and drove by the old neighborhood not to visit, but to pick up a package I'd redirected to a nearby post office. As I turned onto their street, I saw the couple from across the street standing on their lawn heads, close, whispering. They stopped when they spotted my car, one of them waving awkwardly. I didn't wave back. Susan was out too, watering her garden, her eyes flicking toward my parents' house. The lawn was overgrown weeds choking the grass, the mailbox stuffed with envelopes spilling out. It was a mess, a far cry from the neat suburban home I'd kept running. I kept driving the image burning into my mind. My family's world was unraveling, and the neighborhood was watching. I didn't feel guilt, just a strange mix of sadness and resolve. They'd wanted me gone, and now they were seeing what that looked like. Back at Paul and Amber's, I was sorting through their old recipe books when the doorbell rang. Paul let Mom in. She stood in the doorway, clutching her purse like a shield, her face drawn, no trace of her usual book club cheer. "Emily, we need to talk," she said, her voice low but urgent. I stayed seated, gesturing to the couch. "Sit, Mom," I said, keeping my tone neutral. She hesitated, then perched on the edge, her eyes darting around like she was afraid to settle. "The bank's threatening to foreclose," she said, her words rushing out. "Tyler's working nights, but it's not enough. Your dad can't get repair orders without Wi-Fi. We're falling apart, Emily." Her hands twisted the purse strap, and for a moment I saw the woman who'd taught me to bake, not the one who'd stayed silent at the party. "I'm sorry you're struggling," I said, choosing my words carefully, but Tyler said I didn't belong. "He needs to fix this." Her eyes widened. "He's your brother," she pleaded. "He's trying, but it's hard. Can't you help just until we're back on our feet?" I leaned forward, my voice steady. "Mom, I paid for that house for years. Bills, repairs, everything. Tyler pushed me out and you let him. I'm done carrying his mistakes." Her face crumpled, but she didn't argue. "Your dad doesn't know what to do," she said softly. "He's worried." I wasn't surprised. Dad had always stayed on the sidelines, tinkering in his garage while the family frayed. "Then he can talk to Tyler," I said. "He started this." Mom stood, her shoulders sagging. "I thought family meant more to you," she said, then left without another word. Amber, who'd stayed quiet, squeezed my arm. "You did the right thing," she said. I nodded, but Mom's words lingered heavy like a stone. She hadn't defended me that night, but her plea tugged at old ties. I shook it off. They'd let Tyler draw the line, and I wasn't crossing it. I went back to the recipe books, focusing on the present, on the life I was trying to rebuild. But the image of that unkempt lawn, the stuffed mailbox, stayed with me, a reminder of what I'd walked away from. Later that week, Amber mentioned she'd heard from a mutual friend that Tyler had lost a big freelance contract. Without internet, he couldn't deliver designs for a startup he'd been pitching for months. The client moved on, and he was scrambling. I pictured him stressed, hunched over a laptop that wouldn't connect, his pride bruised. Part of me ached. He was still my brother. But then I remembered his coldness, his words at the party, unapologetic and sharp. He'd chosen this, not me. I didn't reach out. I had my own path to focus on. The neighborhood gossip was picking up. Susan had texted again, saying the couple across the street had mentioned Dad's unpaid repair invoices at a block party. My family was becoming the talk of the street, their perfect suburban image cracking. I didn't care about their reputation. I cared about moving forward. I'd started picking up extra shifts at the nursery, saving what I could. My savings were thin, but they were mine, not tied to a house that didn't want me. I wasn't going back, no matter how many pleas came my way. I knew the pressure was building. Tyler's lost contract was just the start, and Mom's visit wouldn't be the last. They were running out of time, and I wasn't going to bail them out. I'd spent too long being their safety net, and now I was building my own. Paul and Amber's house felt like a temporary home, a place to breathe while I figured out my next steps. But I wasn't naive. The storm was far from over, and I'd need to stay strong for what was coming. I sat at their dining table, staring at my phone, the screen dark now. No more calls since I'd blocked Tyler, but I knew Mom would try again. I wasn't ready to hear her voice, her excuses. I needed to hold on to this clarity, this sense of purpose. They'd made their choices, and I'd made mine. The next few weeks would test them, and I'd be watching from a distance, building a life where I wasn't invisible. I was done carrying their weight. Tyler's freelance gigs started falling apart without internet, or so I heard from Amber, who'd caught wind through a mutual friend. I didn't ask for details, I was too busy rebuilding my own life. Tyler had taken a night shift at a local supermarket, stocking shelves under fluorescent lights, a far cry from his designer dreams. I could imagine him pushing a cart of canned goods, his jaw tight, pride bruised. Dad wasn't faring much better, his repair business stalled without Wi-Fi to get orders from neighbors. Their world was crumbling, and I wasn't stepping in. The gossip was spreading faster now. Eric and Danielle, the couple across the street, had posted about my parents' troubles on a neighborhood Facebook group, according to Amber. The post was vague but pointed something about hard times and an overgrown lawn. It was the kind of thing that turned heads in Overland Park, where neat yards were a point of pride. Susan had mentioned it too, her texts more frequent, laced with fake concern. I didn't respond. Their whispers didn't matter to me anymore. I was focused on my job at the nursery, arranging plants, saving every dollar. My shifts at the nursery were long but grounding. I'd spend hours potting ferns, my hands in dirt, feeling like I was planting something for myself again. The pay wasn't great, but it was mine, not wired to a house that didn't want me. I'd started sketching ideas for a new coffee shop. Nothing concrete, just dreams on paper. It felt good to think about my future, not theirs. Tyler's struggles, Dad's stalled repairs, the neighborhood's chatter. They were background noise. I wasn't their fixer anymore, and I wasn't going back. Amber kept me updated, not because I asked, but because she knew I'd hear it eventually. Tyler had lost another client, a big one, after missing a deadline. Without internet, he couldn't keep up with the demands of freelance design. He was working double shifts at the supermarket now, barely sleeping, according to her friend. Dad was borrowing tools from neighbors, trying to pick up cash jobs, but no one trusted his work without online reviews. Mom was quieter, staying out of her book club, probably embarrassed by the gossip. I didn't feel satisfaction, just a quiet resolve. They'd built their lives on my money, my sacrifices, and now they were facing the consequences. I thought about Tyler, the kid who'd sketched logos at my shop's counter, his dreams big and bright. That version of him was gone, replaced by someone who saw me as a burden. I didn't hate him, but I didn't owe him either. Mom's silence at the party, Dad's weak words, they'd all chosen their side. I was choosing mine now. One evening, I drove by the house again, not planning to stop. The for sale sign was up. The paint chipped the lawn worse than before. It looked abandoned, a shell of the home I'd fought to save. I didn't feel pain, just a strange detachment. They were losing everything, and I was building something new. I'd saved enough for a deposit on a small condo, a place to start over. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I kept driving, leaving the house and its memories behind. Back at Paul and Amber's, I focused on the present. I helped Amber with her garden, chatted with Paul about his new business ideas. Their home was a reminder that support didn't have to come with strings. I was grateful for them, for the space they gave me to breathe. My phone stayed quiet now. No more voicemails from Mom, no texts from Susan. I'd blocked Tyler, and the others seemed to be giving up. They were feeling the weight, and I was letting them carry it. The neighborhood gossip had turned into a full-blown story. Amber showed me a screenshot of the Facebook group post now, with comments speculating about my family's fall from grace. It was petty, but it showed how fast things had unraveled. Tyler's supermarket job was a running joke, his designer image shattered. I didn't care about their judgment, I cared about moving forward. My nursery job was steady, and my sketches were piling up, each one a step towards something new. I wasn't invisible anymore, not to myself. I knew the worst was still coming for them. The bank wouldn't wait forever, and their rental apartment was probably next. But I wasn't going to step in. I'd spent years holding their world together, and they'd pushed me out. Now I was building my own piece by piece. The clarity I'd found that first night in the motel was still there, stronger now. They'd learn their lesson, or they wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my burden anymore. I was ready for whatever came next, and I wasn't looking back. 3 months after I cut the payments, the house I'd fought to save was gone. Susan texted me a photo of the for sale sign, the lawn still choked with weeds. I didn't reply. I heard through Amber that my family had sold the place, moving to a cramped one-bedroom rental on the edge of Overland Park, far from the neighborhood they'd called home for decades. The couple across the street had told everyone at a block party, their whispers turning my family's fall into local lore. I didn't go see them. I'd made my choice. I was building a new life. With what was left of my savings, I bought a modest one-bedroom condo in a quiet corner of Overland Park near a park with walking trails. The walls were bare at first, but I started pinning up sketches of coffee shop designs, menus, layouts, dreams I hadn't touched since selling Harper's brew. I took a job as a consultant for a local florist, helping with wedding arrangements and teaching bouquet workshops. It wasn't my old shop, but it felt like a step toward reclaiming myself. Every paycheck went into my own account, not someone else's bills. For the first time in years, I slept without the weight of their expectations pressing down. My days were simple work at the nursery, consult for the florist, sketch at night. I'd walk the trails near my condo, the Kansas air warm and familiar, clearing my head. My phone stayed quiet, no more voicemails from Mom, no texts from Susan. I'd blocked Tyler, and the others seemed to have given up. Their silence was a relief, a sign they were finally carrying their own weight. Amber kept me in the loop, though I didn't ask. Tyler was still at the supermarket working nights, his freelance dreams buried under the reality of long shifts. Dad's repair gigs had dried up completely. Neighbors didn't trust someone who couldn't pay his own bills. Mom stayed out of sight, avoiding her book club, probably too embarrassed to face the gossip. Their new rental was a far cry from the house I'd kept afloat, a small place with thin walls and no yard. They were starting over, and I wasn't part of it. I didn't feel triumph, just a steady calm. They'd built their lives on my sacrifices, and I'd let them, thinking it was what family did. But family doesn't push you out, doesn't let one voice speak for all. Tyler's words, Mom's silence, Dad's passivity, they'd shown me who they were. I didn't owe them my life anymore. I focused on my work, my sketches, my condo. Each step forward was mine, not tied to their needs. I was building something new, something that belonged to me. One evening, I sat at my kitchen counter sketching a new coffee shop logo, the kind Tyler used to doodle at my old shop. The memory didn't hurt anymore, it was just a fact, like the weather. I'd given them everything, and they'd thrown it away. Now they were living the life they'd chosen, and I was living mine. I didn't check on them, didn't ask Amber for updates. I didn't need to. Their world was no longer my responsibility, and that truth felt like freedom. The neighborhood gossip had faded, replaced by new stories, new dramas. Susan stopped texting, and the couple across the street moved on to other topics. My family's fall was old news now, a cautionary tale whispered at barbecues. I didn't care. I was too busy planting roots, literal ones at the nursery, figurative ones in my condo. My florist job was picking up, with more clients booking consultations. I'd started saving for a small business loan, dreaming of a new shop, maybe a cafe this time. I walked by the old house one last time, not out of nostalgia, but because it was on my way to a client meeting. The for sale sign was gone, the windows dark, the lawn still a mess. It wasn't my home anymore, hadn't been for years. I kept walking, my steps light, my mind clear. They'd lost the house, but I'd gained myself. I didn't need their approval, their gratitude. I needed my own. And for the first time, I had it. Back at my condo, I pinned another sketch to the wall, a layout for a cozy cafe with big windows. It wasn't Harper's brew, but it was a start. Paul and Amber checked in, bringing takeout or inviting me to their garden parties. Their support reminded me that family could be chosen, not just inherited. I was learning to stand alone, and it felt right. My phone stayed silent, and I let it. They'd made their bed, and I was done tucking them in. I sat in my new condo, a small one-bedroom in a quiet Overland Park corner, sipping coffee at my own counter. My phone was silent. No more calls, no texts. I'd blocked Mom and Dad's numbers just as I'd done with Tyler's. The quiet wasn't empty. It was peaceful, a space I'd carved for myself. I'd spent years holding their world together only to be pushed out. Now I was building my own, and it felt like home. My walls were covered with sketches, cafe layouts, flower arrangements, pieces of a future I was shaping. I'd stopped checking for updates about them. No more texts from Susan, no whispers from Amber about their struggles. I didn't need to know. They'd lost the house, moved to a rental, and faced the consequences of their choices. I didn't feel joy or regret, just calm. My life was mine now. My florist consulting job was growing, with clients booking me for weddings and events. I was saving for a new cafe, sketching logos at night, each one a step toward a dream I'd thought was lost. Looking back, I saw the lesson carved into every moment of this mess. Family isn't just blood, it's respect, mutual support, and seeing each other's sacrifices. I'd given everything to keep their world turning, but they didn't see me. Tyler's words, Mom's silence, Dad's passivity, they showed me who they were. I didn't hate them, but I didn't owe them either. Self-reliance became my foundation, the key to any bond worth keeping. Without it, love is just a word, empty and brittle. I'd learned that the hard way. This isn't about holding grudges, it's about survival. I'd poured my life into their house, my savings, my dreams, and they called me a burden. Cutting them off wasn't punishment, it was freedom. I blocked their numbers because I deserved a life where I wasn't invisible. They're rebuilding now in their own way, and I wish them no harm, but I'm done carrying their weight. My condo, my job, my sketches, they're mine, built from my own hands, not tied to their expectations. To anyone who's ever felt unseen by the people you'd give everything for, this is for you. Don't let your sacrifices break you. Set boundaries before you lose yourself, because no one else will do it for you. I waited too long thinking family meant carrying their load forever. It doesn't. It means mutual respect, and if that's missing, it's okay to walk away. I did, and I'm stronger for it. My life isn't perfect, but it's mine, and that's enough. Paul and Amber still check in, bringing takeout or inviting me to their garden parties. Their support showed me that family can be chosen, built on care, not obligation. My florist job keeps me busy, and my cafe plans are taking shape, maybe a small place with big windows serving coffee like I used to. I walk the trails near my condo, the Kansas air clearing my mind. I don't look back. They made their choices, and I made mine. I'm not invisible anymore, not to myself. The clarity I found that first night in the motel has stayed with me sharper now. I'd spent years trying to hold on to a family that didn't want me, but I let go. Blocking their numbers was the final step, a line I drew for my own peace. They've learned their lesson, or they haven't. It's not my burden anymore. I'm building a life where I matter, where my work, my dreams, my choices are enough. And that's a victory I'll carry forever. Thank you for listening to my story, for giving me your time and attention. It means more than I can say. I know some of you have felt this, carrying the weight for people who don't see you, only to be pushed aside. I see you, and I'm grateful you've followed me to the end. If this resonates, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Drop a comment below. Share how you found your strength, what pushed you to set boundaries. Let's keep this conversation going. Your stories matter just like mine. Tell me where you're watching from, what time it is, and how you stood up for yourself. This isn't just about me, it's about all of us learning to value ourselves, no matter how hard it gets. Subscribe, hit the bell, and join this community. We're stronger together, and I can't wait to hear your voice in the comments. Thank you for being here.
My name is Crystal Moreno. I'm 28 years old, and this is the story of how I cut the man I once loved out of my life without a single word. If you've ever felt that eerie moment when the air between you and the person you love changes, when a glance feels heavier than a scream, you'll understand. That's where my story begins. It was a Tuesday night, the kind of Tuesday that drags its feet exhausted by Monday, but not close enough to Friday to feel hopeful. Liam and I were on the couch, half watching some reality show neither of us cared about. The glow of the TV flickered across his face, but he wasn't really there. His fingers toyed with his phone knuckles tight, and he kept tilting the screen away from me in tiny, careless motions. I noticed. I'd been noticing for weeks. The late nights at work, the way his text shrank from paragraphs to single-word replies, the quick lock of his phone the second I walked in. It was all there, glowing in neon red, but I pretended not to see. Love does that to you. It makes you complicit in your own betrayal. And then he did it. He turned to me with that look that hollows out your stomach before the words even arrive. Crystal, we need to talk. The TV buzzed in the background, laugh tracks echoing in some other world where people were still happy. I muted it. My pulse hammered in my ears. About what my voice was steady. Too steady. He inhaled like he was about to confess to a crime. And maybe he was. I don't feel the spark anymore. There it was. The classic line. Polished, rehearsed. The coward's way of slicing open someone's chest without leaving visible scars. I stared at him, the silence stretching until he fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. He rushed to fill it. It's not you. You didn't do anything wrong. We've just grown apart. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. My eyes stayed on his, unblinking. Is there someone else? The reaction was instant. Too instant. His eyes widened, hands raised, voice pitching high. No, God. Crystal, of course not. He looked offended, like my question was an insult instead of the most obvious truth in the world. This isn't about that. I need space to figure myself out. I nodded slowly. Okay. That one word froze him. I could see it in his eyes. He had expected begging, maybe tears, promises to fix whatever he thought was broken. Instead, I gave him nothing. He shifted uncomfortably, as if my calm had stolen his script. I think I'll stay at Jess's place for a few days, he said finally, just to clear my head. Sure. His mouth opened, then shut again. For once he had no words. 20 minutes later, he left with a small overnight bag, the front door clicking shut like a period at the end of a sentence I hadn't written. The apartment felt cavernous without him, but not in the way I expected. No tears came, no urge to run after him, just silence. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen counter, coffee cooling between my hands. The world was painfully ordinary, the hum of the refrigerator, the sunlight cutting across the floor until my phone buzzed. Instagram. I swiped open the app. There he was, Liam, laughing on a rooftop bar, arm draped over Jenna, his coworker. The caption, when the vibes just sparkle. 3 hours ago, meaning while I lay awake staring at our empty ceiling, he was already with her, already planning this. I recognized her face from the photos he once showed me at office parties. I remembered the way she laughed too loud at his jokes, the way he leaned just a little too close to her whenever I was around. My stomach twisted not from surprise, but from confirmation. This wasn't spontaneous, this was rehearsed, calculated. I zoomed in on his shirt. It was the same one he'd worn in their work group photo the day before. He hadn't even changed. He hadn't even cared enough to hide it. And her face, God, her face. She was glowing, no trace of conflict, no guilt, just triumph. I didn't rage, didn't throw my phone across the room, didn't even text him. Instead, I deleted his number, blocked him, and erased every photo of us from my gallery. By the time he came back, whenever he came back, he would find nothing left. No messages, no explanation, no Crystal waiting with open arms, just silence. That night I packed. His favorite hoodie, the one I'd accidentally kept, I folded neatly and placed on the bed, a small petty goodbye. The rest of my things went into boxes, quick, efficient, surgical. I moved like a ghost, erasing my presence from the apartment we once shared. The only trace of me left behind was the indentation on my side of the mattress and the faint scent of my perfume on the pillow. When the last box shut with a dull thud, I sat on the floor and stared at the blank wall. I should have cried, I should have screamed, I should have felt something, but there was only numbness. A cold, calculated numbness that whispered, "Good. Let him think he killed you. He'll never see you rise again." And in that moment, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't fight him for closure. I wouldn't demand explanations or apologies. I would give him nothing. My silence would be my revenge. The first night alone was the hardest. Not because I missed him, I was too numb for that, but because of habit. My hand reached for my phone at midnight, muscle memory aching to type, "Good night, Liam." I stared at the empty screen until the letters blurred, then shut it off. Sleep didn't come, but resolve did. Resolve that this wasn't the end of me, it was only the beginning. Silence has a sound. It isn't empty, not really. It hums, it presses, it gnaws. When I chose silence, I knew it would be louder than any words I could ever scream. The night Liam left, I didn't text him. The next morning, I didn't call to ask if he was safe. By the time he returned 2 days later, probably expecting to find me pacing the living room in tears, all he found was emptiness. My key sat neatly on the counter. Half my clothes were gone. The refrigerator was barren except for a single carton of milk and the hoodie I'd left folded on his bed, his favorite one, the one he used to steal from me when winter hit early. It was my parting shot. Small, sharp, enough for him to understand. The texts started almost immediately. At first they were indignant. "Liam, Crystal, what the hell? Why is half your stuff gone?" Then pleading. "Liam, we need to talk, please." I left them on red. By the end of the week, the tone shifted to confusion, even panic. But I had already decided I would never give him the satisfaction of a reply. Mutual friends became his messengers. "Crystal, he says you ghosted him." Chris texted, "Are you really going to just vanish like that?" Ghosted. That word made me laugh, as if I had evaporated into thin air. No, I hadn't ghosted him. I had buried him, quietly, cleanly. Every message from a friend went unanswered. I knew they'd picked their sides the moment they comforted him instead of holding him accountable. The first unknown number text came on day 5. "Hey." I didn't need to guess. The ellipses he added at the end, the hesitance, it was his fingerprint. I stared at the message until my phone dimmed, then deleted it. The next morning, a voicemail. His voice soft, almost foreign in its vulnerability. "Crystal, I just want to make sure you're okay. Call me back." I deleted it without hesitation. In the silence I carved, I rebuilt myself. I started running 5 miles every morning before dawn. The first week, my lungs burned and my calves screamed, but I pushed harder. Sweat blurred my vision, wind sliced at my skin, and for the first time in months, I felt something real. At work, I stayed late, volunteering for projects, devouring tasks like a machine. My boss raised an eyebrow one night when he caught me leaving past midnight. "You okay, Crystal? You've been putting in crazy hours." I smiled even though it didn't reach my eyes. "Just motivated." But the truth was simpler. I needed the noise of work to drown the echoes of him. 2 weeks in, I caught my reflection in a store window after another brutal run. I almost didn't recognize her, the woman staring back at me. Thinner, sharper, eyes darker, not from sadness, but from fire. Good, I thought. Let him miss a version of me that no longer exists. But silence is a double-edged blade. There were nights I ached for the familiar weight of him at my back, the careless way he'd hum while brushing his teeth. "The half-asleep love you," he mumbled before drifting off. My body remembered him even when my heart refused to. I would reach for my phone at 6:30 p.m., muscle memory, expecting his "I'm on my way home." But the screen stayed dark. I forced myself to sit with it, to taste the loneliness until it no longer burned. And slowly it worked. The silence that had once been suffocating began to feel like oxygen. No buzzing phone, no arguments, no pretending not to notice the lies. Just me. I poured myself a glass of wine one Friday night and realized with startling clarity I wasn't waiting for him anymore. Not waiting for his knock, not waiting for his texts, not waiting for his excuses. He was waiting for me, and I wasn't coming back. That was the gift of silence. It turned the tables without me lifting a finger. While I was shedding the skin of the woman who had once loved him, he was unraveling alone, unheard, unseen. And that was only the beginning. It took exactly 37 days. 37 days of silence before the first fissure appeared in Liam's perfect new reality. I remember the moment vividly. I was at my desk at work, head buried in spreadsheets when my phone buzzed. Chris, one of the few friends who hadn't fully taken Liam's side, had sent me a screenshot. It was Liam's Instagram story. A blurry selfie eyes rimmed red, captioned, "When you realize not everyone has good intentions." The image was almost comical. He'd never let me see him like that before, raw, unpolished, pathetic. With me, everything had to be curated. Perfect. Controlled. Now he was spilling desperation into the world like a teenager after his first heartbreak. Chris's text followed the screenshot. Looks like Jenna ditched him after their work trip. Guess he wasn't her only option. I stared at the photo. Smudged mascara under his eyes, hers, not his. Jenna had left him, just like that. I didn't smile, not outwardly, but inside something cold and sharp twisted with satisfaction. Later that night, my phone lit up. Unknown number. Can we please talk? It's important. I recognized the cadence immediately. The half-desperate, half-entitled plea. Liam. Still no apology, just entitlement. I swiped the notification away. A week passed, then another. The messages came in waves like the tide trying to wear me down. The second voicemail arrived at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. His voice trembled, unsteady, punctuated by sharp breaths. Crystal, I know you're ignoring me, but I think I made a huge mistake. Jenna was she was using me. I miss you. Please call me back. I saved it. Not because it touched me, but as proof. Evidence that his regret wasn't about me, it was about rejection, about losing control. By week 6, the facade shattered completely. Chris texted me again this time with a screenshot of Jenna's new post, her on a beach, wrapped around another man. The location tag, the same resort Liam had bragged about taking her to next month. The comments section was chaos, half-deleted messages, bitter replies. Wow, classy. Guess Liam wasn't enough. And right on cue, another message buzzed on my phone. Unknown number. Please, Crystal. I know I hurt you, but I need to see you. I stared at it, imagining him sitting in some dimly lit apartment, clutching his phone with trembling fingers, waiting for my silence to break. It never did, but silence didn't mean I wasn't watching. I checked his profile for the first time in months. His once flashy feed had withered. No more rooftop selfies, no more tagged nights out. Just vague quotes about heartbreak, a few blurry photos of takeout, and a hollow smile that didn't reach his eyes. The man who had once told me I was too emotional now flooded his feed with melodrama. The irony nearly choked me. One night, after a long run, I sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling through his implosion. Did I feel pity? Maybe in fragments, but mostly I felt clarity. Clarity that this was never about love. Not really. It was about Liam needing an audience. A mirror. Someone to reflect back the version of himself he wanted to believe in. When Jenna gave him that, he abandoned me without hesitation. And now that she was gone, he thought I'd slip back into my old role. But he was wrong. I wasn't his mirror anymore. I was the silence that swallowed him whole. And with every new crack in his life, I grew steadier in mine. The weight he once held over me, gone. The power his absence once carried faded. He had become what I always feared, being forgettable. And that was the cruelest truth of all. It was late on a Thursday night when the silence broke, not from me, from him. I had just finished showering after a long run, steam curling in the bathroom mirror, when the knocking started. At first soft, then insistent. Thud, thud, thud. I froze. My heart knew before my mind did. I padded barefoot to the front door, careful not to make a sound. Peering through the peephole, there he was. Liam, shivering in that thin jacket he always wore to look effortless. His hair was messy, eyes darting around like a cornered animal. He knocked again, louder this time, his knuckles pale. Crystal, his voice cracked through the wood. I know you're home. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, counting in my head. 10, 15, 30. I wanted to see how long he'd last out there in the cold. Please, just open the door. 5 minutes. The desperation in his tone was almost foreign. This was the same man who had shrugged off our years together with a lazy, I don't feel the spark anymore. The same man who had paraded Jenna across Instagram while I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Now here he was, trembling outside my door, begging. Finally, I turned the lock. The door swung open so fast he stumbled back. Up close he looked smaller. His nails were bitten raw, his hair unkempt, and the jacket I'd once loved on him was frayed at the cuffs. You look good, he said weakly, scanning me as if I'd let him. I said nothing. Silence filled the space between us like a wall. He rushed to fill it. I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us. About everything. Jenna. She was a mistake. Just a rebound. You were the one who was always there for me, and I... His voice trailed off, throat tightening. I was stupid. I studied him, the smudged eyeliner. From tears, he'd wiped away the quiver in his jaw, the way his hands twitched, like he didn't know what to do with them. He wasn't sorry, not really. He was afraid of being alone. No, I said finally, my voice calm, slicing. You don't regret losing me. You regret that she tossed you aside like last week's leftovers. His breath hitched. That's not... It's exactly what happened. His eyes flared, the mask slipping. For a flash, I saw the man who had walked out on me without a second thought. The man who had let me vanish into silence, assuming I'd be waiting in the wings. I stepped back, my hand firm on the doorknob. And now you're here because you think I'm still the woman who'll clean up your messes. You're really just going to throw away 3 years like this? His voice sharpened, anger mixing with desperation. There it was, the real Liam, the one who believed love was something you could shelf and pick back up when convenient. I smiled, not cruel, not kind, just done, already did. And with that, the door clicked shut. Through the peephole, I watched. He stood there in silence for a long moment, shoulders heaving. Then his fist pounded against the wood twice before falling limp. I saw him wipe at his face with shaking hands, then tug at his jacket as if pulling the seams tight could stitch back his dignity. Finally, the elevator dinged down the hall, the sound of doors sliding open. And then he was gone. I leaned against the door, exhaling the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. This wasn't about love anymore. It was about control, ownership. And I wasn't his to own. That night, I slept better than I had in months. 6 months passed. 6 months of silence so complete it became a second skin. I barely thought of him anymore. The nights I once spent replaying old conversations were now filled with runs. Projects, books that had gathered dust while I was too busy tending to his ego. So when Rachel's wedding invitation arrived, I almost declined. Rachel was one of the few friends who never chose sides. She hadn't coddled. Liam hadn't pushed me for details, just sent a quiet text weeks after the breakup. Whatever happened, I'm here. Come to my wedding. Bring a date if it helps. I thought about bringing someone. God knows I could have. But the idea of showing up on another man's arm just to make a statement felt cheap. So I went alone. The venue was stunning, soft lights strung across high beams, cascades of white flowers trailing from every corner. Exactly the kind of place Liam used to point out in bridal magazines with a smirk asking, "Would you ever want something like that?" I stepped into the reception hall and saw him almost immediately. He was perched at the bar, lavender tie, too tight posture, too stiff. The Liam I remembered always looked effortlessly put together, but tonight his effort showed. His smile didn't reach his eyes. His jaw clenched every time someone walked past without greeting him. I could have ignored him. I should have. But my gaze lingered for just a second too long. His eyes caught mine. It was like watching someone get electrocuted. His spine straightened, his mouth parted, and for a moment I saw it, the relief, the recognition, the assumption that my presence was for him. I raised my bourbon in a mock toast, then turned away. Of course he didn't stay away. He found me near the dance floor during the bouquet toss. Crystal. His voice was syrupy sweet, the same tone he once used with my mother to earn points at family dinners. I turned slowly. Liam, you look... He let his eyes scan me, hesitation thick in his throat. Really great. Thanks. The music swelled around us, people laughing and shouting as the bride prepared to throw the bouquet. But in that bubble, it was just us. Are you seeing anyone? He blurted. I almost laughed. Why? Just making conversation. He fiddled with his cufflink eyes, darting around like a nervous schoolboy. I'm dating someone now. A finance guy. He's amazing. The lie hung in the air, brittle and obvious. Rachel had told me weeks ago he was back on dating apps, cycling through casual flings. Cool, I said, simply sipping my drink. The silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable. Then he broke it with desperation. You know, I think about us a lot. I finally looked at him. Really looked. Stress had carved itself into his face. His hair was thinning at the temples. The easy grin I once loved was gone, replaced by something brittle, hungry. I don't, I said. His smile faltered. That's a lie. 3 years doesn't just... Liam. My voice was flat. 3 years don't vanish, they erode. And you help chip away every piece. Before he could reply, a warm voice cut in. You're monopolizing my date. A hand brushed my elbow. I turned to see Marco, a coworker from accounting, grinning at Liam with playful defiance. Marco was tall, sharp suit, the kind of man who carried himself like he owned the ground he walked on. Liam blinked. You're... what? Her date, Marco said smoothly, sliding his arm through mine. He glanced at me, his eyes twinkling like we'd rehearsed this. Problem. Liam's mouth opened, then closed. He looked between us, flustered. No, Crystal never mentioned. Funny, Marco interrupted lightly. She mentions you all the time. He leaned in slightly, voice lowering just enough for Liam to hear, mostly as a cautionary tale. I couldn't help it, I smiled. For the first time in months, I smiled in his presence. Liam's face paled. His lips pressed into a thin line, and he looked away, searching for something to cling to. But the room kept moving, the music kept playing, and the world didn't pause for his humiliation. Marco squeezed my arm gently. "Come on," he said. "Dinner's starting." As we walked away, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew what I'd see Liam standing there hollowed out watching me leave, the way I had once watched him. Only this time it was permanent. For the rest of the night I didn't think of him. Not once. And that was the truest freedom of all. The wedding dinner began with champagne toasts and clinking silverware, but I barely tasted the food. The sweetness of the moment wasn't on my plate. It was sitting across the hall, watching me, with eyes that burned holes through the air. Liam. He kept glancing over his jaw, tight, his hands restless against the tablecloth. Every time Marco leaned close to whisper a joke in my ear, Liam's knuckles whitened on his glass. I didn't need to hear him to know the words spinning in his head. That should be me. But it wasn't, not anymore. Halfway through dinner, Marco leaned in voice low enough only I could hear. "Is he still staring at you?" I smirked, not bothering to glance over, like a dog locked outside in the rain. Marco chuckled softly. "Good. Let him drown." I hadn't asked Marco to play along, but he slipped into the role so naturally it felt like fate. A coworker who'd seen me claw my way through the wreckage Liam left behind, Marco understood what it meant for me to be seen, not pitied. During dessert, Liam finally cracked. He approached our table with a strained smile, the kind that barely covered the storm beneath. "Crystal," he said tightly, ignoring Marco entirely. "Can we talk?" I set my fork down, tilting my head. "We are talking. Alone." His voice hardened. "Please." Marco raised an eyebrow, his grin sharp. "If you need privacy, maybe you should have thought about that 6 months ago." Liam's nostrils flared. "This doesn't concern you." Marco's hand rested lightly on mine, steady but protective. "Oh, it does. She's my date tonight, which makes it my business." The surrounding tables had started to notice. Whispers rippled through the room. I could feel the weight of curious eyes pressing in, but I didn't flinch. I leaned back, cool and deliberate. "What is it you want to say, Liam? That you regret leaving me? That you didn't mean it? That Jenna was a mistake?" His lips trembled. The truth had already been written across his face, but he couldn't force it out. Not here, not with witnesses. So he said nothing. "Thought so," I whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. The silence stretched thick and suffocating until Marco broke it with a laugh. "See cautionary tale." The words landed like a slap. Liam's shoulders tensed, his cheeks flushed, and for the first time in all the years I'd known him, he looked powerless. Truly powerless. He turned on his heel and walked away, retreating toward the bar like a wounded animal. Later, as the band played slow songs and couples swayed under the string lights, Marco and I stood at the edge of the dance floor. "Want to dance?" he asked, offering his hand. I hesitated, then shook my head. "Not tonight." "Fair enough," he smiled softly. "But you should know he's watching you like a man choking on air." I followed Marco's gaze. Across the room, Liam sat slumped on a bar stool, drink in hand, his eyes locked on me, with a mixture of longing and fury. Once that look would have undone me. Now it only confirmed what I already knew: I wasn't his anymore. The night ended without another confrontation, but not without fallout. As Marco and I left the venue, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You brought him here to hurt me. I see what you're doing." I deleted it. 2 minutes later, another buzz. "You'll never find someone who loved you like I did." This time I blocked the number. Love number chains. That's what he had given me. And tonight, for everyone to see, I had broken them. As Marco hailed a cab, I looked back at the glowing hall one last time. Through the window, I caught sight of Liam, alone, slouched, his tie loosened, nursing his drink like it could fill the void I'd left. He had wanted me to be his audience, but now the show was over. The wedding was supposed to be his chance. I know that now. He thought seeing me would ignite some old spark that I'd fall back into his orbit out of nostalgia or pity. Instead, he unraveled. The first cracks showed the very next night. At 1:43 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You'll regret this. You'll see. No one will ever love you like I did." I stared at the words glowing against the dark of my bedroom. Once they would have cut deep. Now they read like the tantrum of a man who had lost his grip. I blocked the number. But desperation has a way of finding cracks to slip through. 2 days later, another message from yet another number. "You brought him to humiliate me. You wanted to make me look small." I didn't reply. Didn't even delete it this time. I let the message rot in my inbox, unseen, unacknowledged, because nothing enrages a man like Liam more than being invisible. Weeks passed. My life stretched forward steady and calm. Work thrived. My morning runs lengthened until 5 miles became 8. I started sketching again, something I hadn't touched in years. And Liam. He became gossip. Rachel mentioned in passing that he'd been showing up late to work, eyes bloodshot, smelling faintly of gin. Chris sent me screenshots of him posting cryptic quotes on Instagram. Sometimes the ones you love the most betray you the worst. The silence is killing me. It wasn't poetic, it was pathetic. The final unraveling came on a night I hadn't expected to see him again. Rachel's cousin hosted an after-wedding get-together at a bar downtown. I went with Marco, mostly for the company. The place was buzzing music, loud neon lights flickering against mirrored walls. And there he was, Liam in the corner booth, glass in hand, leaning too close to a bridesmaid who clearly wanted nothing to do with him. His laugh was too loud, his gestures sloppy, his charm long gone. I watched from across the room as he whispered something in her ear. She pulled away, disgusted, her eyes flicking toward the gold band on his finger. Married. He was flirting with someone else's wife. Classic Liam. For a moment our eyes met. His expression shifted, hope, fury, shame, all colliding in an instant. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I simply turned back to Marco and asked, "Want to get out of here?" Marco grinned. "Thought you'd never ask." And just like that, I walked past Liam without a second glance. The music drowned out whatever words he tried to form. To me, he was already background noise. That night, as Marco and I sat in a quiet diner miles away sipping coffee and laughing about nothing, I felt it. The final thread snapping. He had no power left. Not over my time, not over my peace, not even over my memories. All he was now was a cautionary tale I'd survived. And in surviving him, I had become someone stronger. Someone who didn't mistake silence for weakness. Someone who knew silence could be the sharpest blade of all. Months rolled by, like pages I no longer cared to reread. The silence I had given him was no longer an act of revenge. It was simply my life, now peaceful, unbothered, full of possibilities that had nothing to do with him. One afternoon, a small envelope arrived in my mailbox. Handwritten, elegant script, Rachel and David. Inside was a thank you card for attending their wedding. A polite note about how much my presence had meant. But at the very bottom, scrawled in Rachel's looping handwriting, was a P.S. that made me pause. By the way, Liam got fired last week. Showed up hungover 3 days in a row. Thought you'd want to know. I stared at the words, not with glee, not with pity, but with a strange kind of detachment. The man who once strutted around with unchecked confidence, who believed women like me were permanent fixtures in his life, had finally been forced to face himself. Not because I fought him, not because I screamed or cursed or demanded apologies, but because I walked away. I slipped the card into my desk drawer right next to 2 things. My promotion letter framed in crisp company stationery. A scrap of paper with Marco's number scribbled in a rush after he insisted we grab dinner for real this time. 2 reminders of endings and of beginnings. That night I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the city lights blur into constellations. My phone buzzed once, just a calendar reminder. Nothing from him. And I realized with sudden clarity he hadn't crossed my mind in weeks. Not as a wound, not as a regret, not even as a lesson. He was simply gone. Funny thing about endings. Sometimes the universe doesn't just close a door. Sometimes it hands you the keys to a better one. And I finally was ready to walk through it.